I would see them on my one day off, and it was like I felt, like heartbroken when I would see them, because it would just and I would think, oh, gosh.
One of them was born before she'd even had her first film role, the accidental result of a teenage romance that never had a chance to grow up. One of them followed her onto movie sets and into modeling studios, chasing a version of the same spotlight, only to watch it burn out early. One of them walked away from acting almost entirely and built a life so private that most people wouldn't recognize his face if he passed them on the street. Their names were Damon and Tahnee, the two children of Raquel Welch. And behind the fur bikini, the pin-up posters, and 4 marriages that never quite lasted, there was a mother who, by her own admission, never gave herself an A for the job. Let's start at the very beginning, before the fame, before the poster, before any of it, with a teenage girl who wasn't yet Raquel Welch at all, the girl who buried her name. She was born Jo Raquel Tejada on September 5th, 1940, in Chicago, Illinois. Her father, Armando Carlos Tejada Urquizo, was a Bolivian-born aeronautical engineer. Her mother, Josephine Sarah Hall, was American, her family tree reportedly reaching all the way back to the Mayflower. When Raquel was about 2, the family moved west, settling in San Diego, where her father took an engineering job with General Dynamics. By most accounts, Armando ran the household with a rigid hand. He wanted his children to assimilate completely, and that meant erasing anything that marked them as different. He reportedly banned Spanish from being spoken in the house entirely, not out of indifference, but out of fear. The kind of fear an immigrant father carries when he's watched prejudice up close and doesn't want his children to inherit it. Decades later, in a 2002 interview with the New York Times, Raquel put it plainly. She said her father suffered for it, and that she suffered too, in a quieter way. A lingering feeling, in her words, of not knowing who she was. That tension in the household reportedly boiled over more than once. In one incident, Welch recounted years later, at age 16, after watching her father mistreat her mother, she picked up a fireplace poker and came at him, warning him never to do it again. She said the moment surprised even her. It wasn't planned. It was instinct. Outside the house, the young girl who would become Raquel Welch was already building the foundation for a career nobody in her family had asked for. She trained in ballet from childhood and started collecting local beauty titles as a teenager. Miss Photogenic, Miss La Jolla, Miss Contour, Miss Fairest of the Fair. She graduated La Jolla High School in 1958, and it was there, as a teenager, that she fell for a boy named James Welch. Raquel and James, she called him Jim, were high school sweethearts. In her 2010 memoir, Beyond the Cleavage, she wrote about how completely she lost herself in that relationship, distracted from her studies, swept up the way only a teenager can be. She became pregnant, and on May 8th, 1959, the two married in Las Vegas. She was 18 years old. Their first child, a son, arrived on November 6th, 1959. They named him Damon. 2 years later, on December 26th, 1961, their daughter was born. They named her Tahnee Welch. The family would come to know her as Tahnee. For a while, the young family stayed together in San Diego. But the marriage didn't hold. Raquel and James separated in the early 1960s and divorced in 1964, when Damon was not yet 5 and Tahnee was only 2. In the years that followed, Raquel later described herself as a single working mother, moving with her 2 small children between San Diego, Dallas, and eventually Los Angeles, chasing small acting roles wherever she could find them, long before anyone knew the name Raquel Welch. Of all 4 men she would eventually marry, she called Jim Welch the best one. In later interviews, she expressed real regret over how quickly the marriage had ended, saying she wished she'd tried harder to make it work. And in a detail that says something about how she felt about that chapter of her life, she kept his last name for the rest of her career, resisting pressure from industry handlers who reportedly wanted her to trade it. Along with any trace of her Bolivian father's surname, Tejada, for something that sounded less foreign to American audiences, she refused. By 1966, the single mother from San Diego had become an international sex symbol. Fantastic Voyage and 1 Million Years B.C. hit theaters that year, and the fur bikini poster from the latter became one of the best-selling pin-ups in the history of the medium. Raquel Welch was almost overnight, everywhere, which meant her 2 small children were growing up in the middle of it. Damon Welch spent parts of his early childhood on the fringes of his mother's sets. In 1971, at around 11 years old, he appeared alongside her and his sister in the drama The Beloved, his first and, for a long time, his only screen credit. Later in the decade, he worked as a production assistant on the 1979 spoof feature The Day the Earth Got Stoned, sometimes credited under the title J Men Forever. In 1984, he served in the same behind-the-camera capacity on his mother's hit exercise video, Raquel, Total Beauty and Fitness. He studied media and communications at Boston University's College of Communication, earning a bachelor's degree. But acting, or the industry his mother had conquered, never became Damon's path. Instead, he built what people close to the family describe as an intentionally quiet life. He doesn't maintain any known public social media presence. Reporters covering the family over the decades have consistently come up with the same result when they go looking for him: very little. What is known is that in 1991, Damon married Rebecca Truman, the daughter of the celebrated English cricketer Fred Truman. Sources differ slightly on the exact timeline. Some accounts describe an initial private ceremony without witnesses in Los Angeles, followed by a formal wedding at Bolton Abbey in England. That formal wedding reportedly made its own small splash in the British press, in part because of the dress his mother wore to it. The marriage was short. Damon and Rebecca divorced roughly 15 months to 2 years after they wed, sometime around 1992 or 1993, depending on the source. Damon did make occasional public appearances at his mother's side over the years. He accompanied her to the 46th Academy Awards in April 1974, where she served as a presenter, and stood with her again in June 1996 when she received her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Beyond moments like those, though, he largely stayed out of frame, both literally and figuratively. Available public information doesn't offer much else about where Damon Welch is or what he's doing today. What information does exist suggests a man who watched what fame did to his mother's life and chose, deliberately, not to chase a version of it for himself. His younger sister's path looked almost nothing like his. Tahnee Welch spent much of her early childhood on the move, shuttled between Spain, England, and Italy before eventually returning to the United States for schooling. Unlike her brother, she leaned directly into the industry her mother had built a career in. At 16, she dropped out of school and left home. After a couple of years working odd jobs, she moved to New York and began studying acting seriously. Her break came in Italy. In 1984, she landed the lead role opposite acclaimed Italian actress Verna Lisi in Amarsi un Po, a film that became a favourite on Italian television. Not long after returning to New York, she was cast in Ron Howard's 1985 summer blockbuster Cocoon, playing Kitty alongside veteran actors Jessica Tandy, Hume Cronin, and Maureen Stapleton. The role brought her real visibility, and she reprised it in the 1988 sequel Cocoon: The Return. Later credits included the 1996 drama I Shot Andy Warhol, in which she played Viva. Alongside acting, Tahnee built a genuine modelling career, appearing in American and Italian Vogue, British GQ, and Germany's Bonti. In 1995, she posed for Playboy, landing both the cover and a nude pictorial, an echo, deliberate or not, of the kind of image her mother had spent an entire career navigating and, at times, resenting. her personal life carried its own difficulties. According to her IMDb biography, Tahnee has spoken about struggling with outside staff her mother employed to help manage childcare while Raquel worked, describing those hired hands as something that interfered with the closeness between mother and daughter. It's a detail Raquel herself touched on in her memoir, Beyond the Cleavage, candidly admitting that her children wouldn't give her an A as a parent. Tahnee also survived a frightening incident in January 1988 when she was attacked and mugged outside her Manhattan apartment late at night, knocked to the ground and kicked before her assailants fled with her belongings. One of the two men involved was caught by witnesses within minutes. Romantically, Tahnee was reportedly in a long-term relationship with actor Jared Harris, known for his later roles in The Crown and Mad Men from around 1991 to 1996. She is never married and has no children of her own. In the years since, Tahnee has largely stepped back from the spotlight that once seemed to be pulling her toward the same kind of career her mother had. Precise, current details about her life today are limited in available public reporting. Another instance of a Welch child choosing, or simply settling into, distance from the industry that first made the family name famous. Raquel Welch died on February 15, 2023, in Los Angeles, at the age of 82, following what her manager described at the time only as a brief illness. It would later come out, once her death certificate was obtained by TMZ that April, that the official cause was cardiac arrest, with Alzheimer's disease listed as an underlying condition that had contributed to it, a diagnosis she had never shared publicly. She left behind a career spanning more than 30 films and 50 television credits, a Golden Globe for the Three Musketeers, and an image, the deerskin bikini from 1 million years B.C., so enduring that it arguably outlived the rest of her filmography in the public imagination. She was married 4 times in total, to Jim Welch, to producer Patrick Curtis, to French filmmaker André Weinfeld, and finally to restaurateur Richard Palmer. And every one of those marriages ended in divorce. Only the first produced children. In her later years, she spoke openly about being content on her own, telling interviewers she was too set in her ways to try marriage again, and she never did. Both Damon and Tahnee were named as her survivors when she passed. Neither has built a public profile anywhere close to their mothers, and by most measures, that appears to have been by design rather than accident. Damon, the boy who briefly appeared on his mother's film sets as a child, grew into a man who kept his adult life almost entirely off the record. Tahnee, who followed her mother most directly into acting and modelling, built a real career of her own in the 1980s and 90s before quietly stepping back from it. There's something worth sitting with in that. Raquel Welch spent decades as one of the most photographed women on the planet, her image reproduced on more posters and magazine covers than she could ever fully escape, even when she tried. Her 2 children, raised in the middle of that exposure, both eventually chose something closer to the opposite, a life mostly out of frame, largely undocumented, and entirely their own. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more fascinating stories.